there. Now, for those who don't know, Bronny James is on a two-way contract, and what this means is essentially that Bronny James will play in the G League as well as on the Lakers' actual roster. It was announced a couple weeks back that Bronny James would continue to report to the G League roster, but would return to the actual Lakers roster for home games moving forward. So of course, expectations were very high and a lot of people came to tune in and watch Bronny in the G League. But in just 2 games in the G League, Bronny averaged 5 points per game on 28 minutes. After his second game, it was announced by the South Bay Lakers that he would miss 8 games due to a heel contusion. Now let me get this straight. When Bronny was on the Lakers roster, he was completely fine, and then now that he went back to the G League after 2 games and underperformed, he magically has a heel contusion and he's about to miss 8 games. I'm sorry fam, but this is complete cap, and I think we gotta be a little bit honest with ourselves at this point. I think the Bronny experiment is over now. I mean, this guy's had enough time. I think it's pretty clear that Bronny is not NBA material, let alone G League material. And quite honestly, I think LeBron's ambitions have ruined Bronny James' actual shot at an NBA career. And this is why. LeBron wanting to be the first player to play with the Sun legitimately crushed any real chance that Bronny had at being an NBA player. Because look at the stigma attached to Bronny's name now. There's not a single person in the NBA who's not trying to be politically correct or not get on the wrong side of Bron that believes that Bronny should be on an NBA roster or a G League roster. And when you look at other players on the South Bay Lakers, such as G League standout Quincy Olavari, on the flip side, he's actually balling. This specific player that I mentioned in the G League is averaging 23 points, 5 rebounds, and 6 assists. This is someone that the Lakers would actually benefit from calling, but instead, Bronny's getting that spot on the Lakers roster when they could use some extra firepower from a guy like this. And this is something that Gilbert Arenas and Kwame Brown argued about on their podcast when discussing Bronny James taking up a roster spot that he honestly doesn't deserve.
In the NBA, his daddy said he's ready to play right now. While he was a freshman in college, Dad said he was ready to play. And this is so far from the truth. I play video of this kid coming off the pick and roll. He's rounding the pick and roll. And that would make sense if you trained him, because if you round the pick and roll, you're fast enough to just keep going by somebody and they can't stay in front of you. Or if you round the pick and roll and you're so fast, they would have to back up and get to the paint, which will lead for you a quick jump shot. Bronny James don't have the natural ability of Gilbert Arenas. So maybe you didn't see that he wasn't going shoulder to shoulder, that he was rounding it, allowing that defender to catch up. And maybe that's why you think I'm hating, opposed to maybe you should have watched different and not trained him to be you and trained him to be him. And so it's a disservice to all the guys that's in the G League that Bronny got the 55th pick, because all of those guys, even the number 1 pick in the G League draft, would wish he was the 55th pick. He definitely could.
But he hasn't in 3 years. It's been 3 years.
He does. If you listen, I played the interview with D-Wade. He said his son called him. He said, I don't want to hear how hard it is. If you want something bad enough, you work at it and you accomplish it. But Dwayne Wade is part owner. If he wanted his kid to get advanced up, he could have. Dwayne Wade seemed like that's the one help he gave him to say, hey, I'm your pops. This is what you want to do. I'm going to get you there, and then it's on you.
Yes.
And he took his hands off. LeBron never took his hands off.
But that's the thing. What Dwayne Wade did is, I'm going to use my power to get you here. You got to figure this shit out yourself. The same.
But that's not what LeBron is doing.
Yeah, I'm getting you here. You got to figure this shit out yourself.
How is that figuring it out yourself when he don't have to travel with the team? How is that figuring it out yourself when he scores 4 to 5 points? And then now when he gets a stretch of 4 games, somehow his bone in his heel is bruised. You and I both know that takes like 2 to 3 weeks for a heel bruise. He's out indefinitely.
I completely agree with Kwame Brown. I don't care what nobody says. This is absolute nepotism at its core. And it's really sad because, number one, the NBA is already having a bad rap for how their players are being perceived as entitled spoiled brats who don't want to play any games, who don't want to play through injuries, and who don't want to be competitive. And number two, you're literally degrading the value and the authenticity of your basketball culture when you allow something like this to happen. Even Michael Jordan, who I personally consider to be the best NBA player of all time, was not able to get his son in based on pure nepotism. And of course, that's as a result of his son not being good enough as well too, but Bronny isn't good enough either. But then number three, even as a father. One of your jobs as a father is to set realistic expectation for your children, and another job is to be able to let them hit rock bottom or do the hard things on their own. What type of example are you setting for your son just to allow them to go scot-free through all the work, through all the development, and just get a spot to the NBA? It's not supposed to work like that, fam. You are supposed to put in work, go in the gym, get better, and make it there on your own. You're not setting a good example as a father by just allowing your son to be able to go there just because you want to meet some magical figure and be the first player ever to play an NBA game with your son. I don't think that's cool at all. Realistically, Bronny should have never left college. He should have stayed in college for at least 3 to 4 years, developed as much as possible, learned as much as possible in the system, and then tried to go to the G League or declare for the NBA draft. And I think what makes this even sadder is that you see a perfect example of this being done, right? You see Carmelo Anthony and his son Kiyan Anthony, where he just officially announced that he's going to be going to Syracuse, where he's following in his father's footsteps. He's going back to the college that Carmelo Anthony went to and the college that Carmelo Anthony won a title at when he was in the NCAA. This is how you do it. This is an example of a young kid, a young bull who put work in the gym, became a top 40 recruit, and went back to his father's college. No handouts, no gimmies, just hard work in the gym and proving himself. And if he continues this rate in the NCAA, he'll be able to be a top 20 or top 10 pick in the NBA draft next year as well. And to further emphasize this point and bring this home, we got to think about what happens to Bronny after LeBron retires, right? Because we eventually know that day is going to come, whether it be next year or the year after next year. Eventually, LeBron's old ass is going to have to hang it up. And then what for Bronny? So again, I think LeBron has done a huge disservice for his son. I think it's going to be a huge mistake. I think if you were going to let him come to the NBA and use your nepotism or whatever to be able to get him in, at the very least, you should have let the Phoenix Suns draft him. I think even if Bron pulls some strings to be able to get Bronny on an NBA roster, the stigma would be far less if he was able to go on a different team, prove himself from the ground up, make the roster, and then play or eventually get sent to the G League. At least it would have been seen as, okay, this guy's got here from his father, but at least he's trying to put the work in on his own. But Bronny being under his father's coverings on the Lakers and us knowing how the GM works, we know that this is all LeBron's doing. In a weird way, I kind of feel a little bit sorry for Bronny because of the situation and because of everything that we know is going to happen. Actually, let me take that back. I don't feel sorry for this guy at all. You're getting to play in the NBA when you don't deserve it. You're getting paid millions of dollars on top of that to do so. Nah, you'll be all right, kid.